Hello, everybody. This is Debbie Eno from Teacher Success Coach with another episode of Home Education, Homeschooling, depending on where you are. And another guest from around the world, my own London, talking about her journey on homeschooling and what some of the challenges were. Welcome, welcome, welcome. First of all, sorry, everybody. We came on late because my computer was giving me a number of challenges. And my video is not on. I'll have to put it intermittently because I'm having some challenges. It goes off, it switches off, all craziness. That's the life of technology, I'm afraid. So, okay. Hello, my dear. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. I really, really appreciate it. This is exciting.
Thank you for accepting the offer to come on. It really is fascinating. I'm really excited to have you on so that you could share your journey with us, because I do feel it is important that people are aware there are alternatives to the mainstream education. I am not saying the mainstream education is not brilliant. It has its upside, but it also has its downside. One of the downsides is, for me as a teacher, is having 27 and 30 plus children in the class. It's very difficult to be able to give all of them the attention they need and teaching them according to their learning style. It's not always possible, but we do try. So parents need to know, carers need to know that they're alternative. And when you actually, you see, this is some of the challenges there. When you actually home educate your child, there's so much more, because you're actually teaching that child according to their individual needs. And in the education system, we're not able to do that. So welcome, 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 my dearest. Tell us about yourself and tell us why you started homeschool and share your journey with us. I'll have to probably switch off my camera off and on because it seems to be flickering, okay? So when you see me off, I'm still here. I've just switched my camera off temporarily. Okay, thanks very much.
So, hi again. My name is Yamuna, and people call me Shorty because I'm an itty bitty 5-foot person. I have 2 boys. One is almost 9 and one is almost 6. I've been home educating for 4.5 years. So prior to the pandemic, home education has been an emotional roller coaster at times, but overall, it's really been a wonderful journey for me to experience. Actually, what I've learned and what I would definitely say to anyone who is interested in home education is that it's really not just about the education of the children. Children have so much to teach us. And I think if more parents understood how much we can learn about ourselves and in turn sort of create a beautiful relationship, maybe more people would be into doing it. There are so many myths and misconceptions and misunderstandings around home education. And I have to say, after 4.5 years of doing it, I kind of get bored of the conversations. I've had them so many times, but the truth is I'm very, very passionate about education. And when people genuinely come to me with an interest and not a preconceived notion of who I am, because a lot of people think like if you home educate, you're just some ippy dippy weird person living on the outskirts of society, when that's really, really an outdated idea of the whole thing anyway. Our home education journey is very, very flexible. That's the number one thing I would say to anybody who is considering home education. And flexibility is beautiful, you know, and like you said, it's about, I specifically go with the interests of my children. And even I have wobbles because I'm half Indian, so there's like an old Indian lady in me going, no, they have to do that and they have to do English. And then there's the more grounded modern me that really understands and accepts and appreciates the knowledge that there is now behind education. And we do know that children thrive in environments where they are learning about things that they're passionate about. So that's another thing that I would have to say. Over the 4.5 years, I've really understood that learning has to be fun. And if children are forced and pressured into learning, you have to learn this, you have to learn that, that's where nothing really goes in. So that's, I suppose, my journey in a nutshell. But if there are any other specific questions, please shoot them at me.
Yeah, I do love the idea that, because this is something I say to my students all the time. As you guys out there know that I'm a teacher, and teaching have to be fun. When I'm teaching my students, I am all over the place. I teach with my hands, with my body. You know, we have fun in my lesson. You know, we do meditation, we dance, we stretch. It's gonna be fun. And the more education is fun, the more students are gonna take in the knowledge that you're giving them. But when it is boring, they're more likely to switch off. And, that's one of the aspects I like in terms of home education, whereby you are connecting to what the children like, and it is fun because they're learning it in a fun way. Whereas in the education system, it is far more structured and programmed. And I do not feel that children need to be programmed, because the more you program them, when they miss a piece of that programming, they've lost everything, because they've forgotten everything, because there were no joy and fun in it. So I totally agree with what you say, and I totally get what you say. One of the things is, why did you decide to home educate in the first place? You've said you've been doing it for 4.5 years. Why did you decide that you were going to do that?
So when my eldest son Milo was in nursery, we sort of had the idea that he would automatically go into reception. And then we received the Ofsted report from the school that he would have been going into. And it had fallen in the two areas that my husband and I were specifically very passionate about. So my ex-husband, the father of the children, he is ex-Navy, and he does security, and their security was lacking. It was sort of, I don't know, they had to change some things with regards to the school gates and everything. We didn't like that the security wasn't on point. And then and for me, coming from an international school where it was very inclusive to different races, religions, and all of that, they were failing the students coming to the school who were speaking English as a second language. And that just broke my heart. My boy came home one day and he said, "Mommy, there was a boy crying all day at school today." And I was like, "Well, why was he crying?" And he said, "Well, he doesn't speak English and the teachers didn't understand him." And I said, "Well, how did they deal with that?" And then he said they just left him in the corner and he was crying all day. And honestly, even to this day, I think about that boy and I think, I really hope, obviously now it's like 4 years later, I'm sure he speaks English now, but I think about that boy and I think about what it must have been like to be in an environment where nobody understands you and nobody really, they might not understand you verbally, but someone should have understood him and comforted him emotionally.
Yes.
Right? Because that's learning as well. And the national curriculum and overall the school education system doesn't really take into account emotional intelligence. IQ tests, they don't take into consideration emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence is a superpower. So those were the two first things. Their Ofsted report fell for these two scenarios. And then I had come from a private school background, and my family had always was quite privileged and had money, but we took a dip and we were struggling a little bit financially. So whereas our children, in my mind, would have one day gone to private school automatically, that wasn't an option for us. I remember my husband at the time saying, "You know what, like I could move some things around and we could probably do it. We could send them to private school." And I was like, "You know what? I don't think it's worth it. It's a ridiculous amount of money. And we're going to have more than one child. So then we're going to have to double it, And I then started researching home education, and one of the first things I came across was a talk by Sir Ken Robinson on education And it blew my mind. And that's probably the thing that cemented my my decision to home educate. He talked about creativity not being, something really taught in school, and adaptability. And whereas if you think about a company nowadays, if you're not adaptable and you're not creative, your company is going nowhere, right? So I really, really fell in love with Sir Ken Robinson. I mean, may he rest in peace. He taught us so much. But that was it. I went to my husband and I said, you know what, I think we could do this on our own. And I thought he would be opposed to it, but actually he was right on board. He's like, I don't want to send my kids away for the majority of the week, for the majority of the year, for the majority of their young lives. Let's not do that. So I threw myself into home education. I read books. I got on the Facebook groups. I started meeting people. And 2 years into the home education journey, I really found a group that has been life-changing. I've created now the village that I wanted. I have wonderful mothers in my group, some really inspiring hands-on fathers in the group. We're all really supportive, and we all have that like-minded idea that it is a village. So I have no problem, with other parents in the group talking sternly to my children if need be. Whereas I think a lot of parents don't like it when other people sort of, not reprimand, that's the wrong word, but sort of tell their children if there's something they don't like, right? And the parents are like, oh no, you can't talk to my child like that. But those parents, actually, they talk to their children quite terribly at times. So sometimes I wonder whether it's a bit of a projection, like they're seeing you talk to their child unfavorably, but you actually talk to your child much more unfavorably than I've just done. I've just been sort of I'm a firm parent. I think some people would, definitely in the group that I'm in, I'm one of the firmer parents and one of the stricter parents. But overall, yeah, like I said, I've created this wonderful village around my boys, and their father isn't really in the picture anymore. So I'm even more grateful for the men in the community, because I think it's very, very important for young boys to have good role models, good male role models in their lives, especially if they're being raised by single mothers.
I totally agree with
That
you.
was a lot.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And in schools, you don't get as much of that as you would like, because I have spoken to the school I'm in. I've spoken to some of the seniors, and I've said to them that some of these children in my group, I do feel that they need mentors, and they need real, they need strong male mentors, because as we know, in schools, there are not so many men in schools. There are far more female in schools. And as we know, a lot of these children are brought up by, single females, which they do a fantastic job. But at the same time, they do need the balance of a positive male role model in their life. And I really agree with you, because there's sometimes, single parents, sometimes they forget that they need that extra child, need that extra male, especially as a male in their life, role model in their life. Because one of the things I do as well, I do voluntary for a mentoring organization called the 100 Black Men of London. And we are looking for lots of men, because the majority of the mentors are female, and we have a lot more male young people in the group, but not as many male mentors to support them.
Yeah.
And that's the same projection I'm seeing in education. And it's even worse in primary school. You have far more females. It's overwhelmed with females than males. So when you actually do the home educating and you find, as you say, your group, you have, the men in the group, it's wonderful.
It is. I'm so grateful, really, like 3 of the dads in particular that, I'm quite close to them and their wives. And it's priceless. You know, again, like I said, I'm so, so grateful. Like it just transpires that my husband isn't really in the picture anymore. And my boys need that. And
Yeah.
also, you know, it doesn't always need to be like, well, technically a dad or anything. My boys play football with a young guy who's just turned 22. He is half Nigerian, half Jamaican, such an intelligent, talented, emotionally intelligent, well-rounded young man. And, you know, he has a business, he has an idea of what he wants to do in life, he's independent. And again, I'm really grateful for him being in my boys' lives. They can see it's not just the 30, 40, 50-year-old men that have it together. There are also very, very many young, inspiring young guys out there. And it would be wonderful if they could be mentoring kids, you know. I have to say, from what I have seen in the recent months, because I've been meeting more and more young people, maybe that's where my work will sort of lead me naturally. But when young men work with their body, be it dance or sport or any form of physicality, I feel they're much more grounded and confident. That's just something that I've observed, but I'm sure there's something to it. Again, sort of looking at human behavior and education. If you have a craft, a job where you need to use your body as your tool, I think that just raises your emotional intelligence. And again, you know, the arts, singing, dancing, drama, poetry, all of that is being cut from the national curriculum.
Yes.
And I understand, like, Rishi Sunak wants us all to be like mathematicians, like fantastic. But where did we all turn to in the pandemic?
Yeah.
We turned to Netflix, to all of the movies and the actors, and we watch movies that we never would have watched before. You know, that is art. You know, these are people creating art for our entertainment. You know, the arts needs to have more support, just like mental health needs to have more support. You know, like it's not all about like the stock market and mathematicians.
I totally agree with you there, because I feel as much as saying that, you know, children need to have maths until they're 18 or whatever, I think it's very unrealistic.
What about the child who doesn't enjoy math, who's not good?
Or can't do it, cannot connect with it. It's like my students, you know.
Very quickly, I just want to say, like, the stigma around not being good at something in school. My boy is 9. I'm confused by his math. I was never good at math. I always heard my mom say when I was growing up, oh, I'm terrible at math. I'm terrible at math. Realistically, well, neurologically speaking, I think I heard that phrase so many times, it kind of became my truth.
Yes.
I kind of feel like now I'm 40, I've passed the age where I'm suddenly going to be amazing in math. And I don't really have the passion to suddenly be a mathematician. But that, if I had been forced to do it till 18, like, it just doesn't really make sense. I feel like these politicians are coming up with strategies that don't really make sense. They're not looking at the individual, you know, passions of children. They're only looking at what mathematicians would do for the country in 20 years.
That's exactly it, because I had some children came to me and said, Miss, what do you think of this? This doesn't make sense, because, you know, I don't like maths. So why would I be staying until I'm 18? So what am I supposed to do if I don't like it? And it is true. It is true. Yeah. I think they would be better off keeping the students, the young people, with the tools necessary for the outside world, like budgeting, like how to open my bank account, like, you know, what's going on in terms of the finance and stuff like that. Instead of saying they all need to learn maths until they're 18. Not every child is going to like maths. Not every child is able to cope with maths now. It does not make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
So,
and you know, if you look at the school system, it was set up in the Victorian times where
Yeah.
they needed to create factory workers. So
Yes.
it was, we're cattling you in and you're going to learn this, and then we cattle you out and you go directly to a factory. Now we have so much more entrepreneurs. We have so many people who are, doing their own thing in the world. And actually, if you look at where the world is going with technology, we are teaching children for jobs that will not exist in the future. I believe 100% we need more mindfulness. We need more technology in school, like coding. So my son, the 9-year-old, he does coding on Saturdays. He does 3D game design and Python coding. This is where the future is at. And that is, I'm so big on mindfulness, but I'm also very, very big on tech. If we want our children to learn and be successful in the future, they need to start coding as soon as possible.
I totally agree with that. Whereas the school system doesn't give that. The school system prepares them for the capitalist society. However, and it also programs them for the capitalist society. So therefore, all of this, the hidden curriculum is all there. And realistically, as you rightly say, it doesn't equip them. Hence the reason why when you actually homeschool your children or your child, it means that you could teach them everything that the national curriculum doesn't give them and more. And they're going to be so much more rounded than they are right now, because looking at the education system, I don't have enough time to teach the children everything. And what we are doing is we are programming them to pass the tests. That's all we're doing. Programming them to get the GCSEs and the A-level. And when the school finish, get the numbers, they're done with them. It doesn't matter what they go and do after. It doesn't matter if they understand how to function in university. That's not the school problem anymore, because they're not developing wrong the children, because we're not. We're more concerned about, the contents. Because I've been told in a number of schools I was teaching in before, my concern is, the context. Because like you, I believe in mindfulness, I believe in meditation, I believe in, empowerment. So I do that all with my students. And one, in a number of schools I've been in, I've been told that, you take a little bit of time to actually, like do the quotes with them or do mindfulness with them. My concern is about the contents. Really? My argument always is, if you don't have rounded individual, the contents make no sense to them. Whereas in home education, you could do all of those things.
Yeah. It's about, like we said before, it's about connecting and making the education enjoyable. But again, I just feel like it's so black and white to me now that I home educate. I mean, think about it. For example, if we go to the little kids. So you're a 6-year-old kid and you're going to be put in a class and you're supposed to trust everything that this nice lady says, your teacher. Okay. And you know what? You love her and she's amazing. And you really, really connect with her for 10 months. And then you go to another class and that teacher's gone forever. Like, what are we doing to children? If you, again, I want that connection. I love that some of the people who teach my children have been in his life for 4 years. There is a consistency of the people in the village, but to just get rid of it, I feel sorry for the children that are in your wonderful class and you're going, you know what, let's ground ourselves. Big, big word for children and adults, grounding. Let's ground ourselves. Let's be in our bodies. Let's take this moment to try and learn something. And you're genuinely there for the well-being of your children, but you're not seeing them after next year, right? Predominantly, let's just say. For the majority of teachers. I guess some teachers do have kids for a couple years, but I just think that, it's just another thing that doesn't really make sense to me in the school system.
It is very true. It is very true, because what comes with that is insecurity of the children.
Yeah, it's an attachment. Imagine it's, you're attached to someone and then they're gone.
Yeah. It's interesting that you said that, because I do supply and I tend to teach. I deliberately don't teach the younger years. So I teach the sixth formers. So which means that preparing them for university, and after they finish, I'm normally teaching year 13, so the next stage is university. And there's sometimes when you're
That's
going through, yes, 2 years.
yeah.
Or sometimes I'm in the final, sometimes I'm in year 13 towards the end of the thing. And one of the things is, when you go into a school and you go into, like I started this school in, what month is this? January. Yeah. And the first thing students would always say to you, Miss, are you going to stay?
You know what? Again, it breaks my heart. It really does.
Are you going to stay? And even though, for me as a teacher, even though there's sometimes, I've gone into school and I'm thinking, oh, I might start in September, I think I really don't like the school and I really want to leave school. Because of what these children have said to you, Miss, are you going to stay? You feel so obligated to stay until they finish. Because you realize that they form an attachment because they've had so many other teachers. It's like one school I was in 2021. I started in January, and it was, I finished in the academic year. One students would say, Miss, are you going to leave? Yes, well, I was just covering maternity. And even though I'm still connected with the student, and they say, Miss, you need to come back to rescue us. And I feel so bad. I'm thinking, oh my goodness. So when you think of that, how the education system operates, it's just like a conveyor belt. In, out. And then not much consideration for these students, for these young people. So when you home educate, you know that you are having consistency. Some children are far more attached than others. So that form of attachment is important for them in terms of they doing well in the future. Where some children are okay in terms of attachment, but the majority of young people, they want and need that form of stability and attachment. And I'm not too sure if the education system have really seen that.
They're definitely not. It's funny that you say that about attachment. I'm reading a book at the moment called Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate. And he talks about, attunement and attachment. Again, if you're talking about schools in, areas that don't have a lot of money, that probably have more single moms living on, a very, very basic amount of money, there are already attachment and attunement issues. I don't want, not placing any blame, but there are already attachment and attunement issues at home for whatever the mother is going through, whatever her circumstances is. So not only are you feeling a sense of potential anxiety and lack of connection at home, you then go to school to find that. And then look, potentially you have a nice teacher who's kind and understanding, but then she's gone after 1 or 2 years. Again, it's setting up for it's setting children up to just constantly feel abandoned, right? And again, all children should feel safe. They should feel safe at home and they should feel safe at school. And I don't think at all that children are feeling safe at school. Yes, some of them have an amazing time, but bullying in this country, if I'm not mistaken, is still a massive, massive problem. Imagine not feeling safe at home and then going to school and being bullied. I can't think of a worse childhood. You wouldn't put an adult in that situation. I don't understand why you would put a child through that situation,
I totally agree with you there. Thank you for that. Another thing is, what do you feel that the traditional education system lacks? And is it not equipping your child with what they need? So basically, what do you think in terms of the traditional education? What do you think they lack? And do you feel that are they equipping your child with what they need?
I mean, we've kind of already covered it a little bit, but in short, I think it's an outdated system. There's not enough mindfulness. There's not enough creativity. There's not enough support. And I mean support for the teachers, for the students, for the whole educational system in this country. You know, it's not just placing the blame on one person or one system, you know. And then no, it's not equipped, because like I said, we're not teaching them for jobs that are going to be in the future. You know, it's just not good enough. Like, you know, I just feel like it could be so much better, you know. I would love to see someone really on a higher level take accountability and say, do you know what, this system isn't really working. Because, for example, in like Finland, that has one of like the best like academia in the world, they hardly get any homework. Most of the people have a summer house. Most of them speak 2 or 3 languages. Like when it comes to intelligence, like they're doing it right. And they start at 7 years old. It's everything learned through play until them. In the teen years, they don't have a lot of homework. There isn't a pressure. There is a genuine enjoyment and much less pressure. And I think that's like a big thing. I just don't understand why the United Kingdom doesn't take lead from other countries where the education system is so different, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Going back to Finland as well, you know, they finish at 2:30, and it makes such a difference in terms of there is none of this situation. And this sad thing I find with the education system, they seem to feel that the more content you give the children, the more they're going to be able to learn. But that's not the case. You know, content, it doesn't go into the heads.
Because well, as we said, you want them to remember momentarily so they can pass the test, but actually none of this information is being retained. And there's actually a little equation that I learned along my journeys, and it says emotion plus information equals retainable information. So basically, if you mix an emotion, especially if you mix an emotion with an experience, that experience stays with you, right? Unfortunately, it happens on the plus side and the negative side. So something really, really wonderful can happen to you, and you will probably remember every aspect of that thing that happened. On the flip side, when something very, very traumatic happens to you, you remember that as well. And actually, if we look at the brain, it doesn't always have to be severe trauma. It can just be at the wrong time of your emotional psychic state, potentially like when you're a kid, like if you cried too long, or, you know, just little things like that, that can still cause trauma in the brain.
Yep. That is very true. Another thing is, as we know, in primary school, children are very, they're very creative, they're very curious, they're thirst for knowledge. But when they transition to secondary school, they've lost that. How do you think, and how do you, as a home educator, how do you ensure that the thirst for knowledge and curiosity continues on? How do you ensure that takes place?
It's a challenge, I have to say. Like, I've personally experienced it. Like, my older one has always had such a thirst for knowledge and really genuinely has enjoyed to learn, but my little one isn't like that. So whereas I was so confident in my ability to facilitate a space for education, what worked for my first one wasn't working for my second one. And I've been losing my patience, and I had to really reflect on myself. Okay, this isn't working. Like, I'm losing my temper. He's crying. I know the basics. This is not how he's going to learn. And I had to adapt and be flexible to meet my child where he was ready to learn. And actually, this year, I've made a very, very conscious effort to spend more time with my children on their education, especially the younger one, because he needs me to be more hands-on. Whereas the older one, I could kind of fling him an exercise book and I'll be like, hey, do that. And he was fine. This one needs much more of my attention. And again, I get to teach my children at home. I get to see those magical moments where they're going from making the sounds to actually blending a word. I get to see it in my children's face when they master a skill. And that's something that I didn't realize that I would have been missing. I would have just sent them to school and they would just come home and they'll be able to read. But I actually get to experience firsthand how my children are learning. So now I understand that my little one is more visually stimulated, he's more creative, and I need to spend more time with that. Sorry, I feel like I've gone off on a tangent now. What was the original?
No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Because thank you for that, because that's beautiful. Because then what this is demonstrating to us, every child learns differently. And in the classroom, you cannot do that. In the classroom, if your second child was with a group of other children, he would have been lost because he is creative. And in a lot of cases that when he goes to secondary school, that doesn't mean the teacher is able to pick that up. Whereas in primary school, because, in some aspect of primary schools, depending on the school, they're still learning to play, that might be okay. But that child, your child, was not being taught according to his needs and his learning style. Whereas you've identified that and you've switched.
Yes. And I think that was your original question. Like, how do we, adapt with them? Yeah. It's tricky. That's all I can say. Like, it's really tricky when one thing is working and it's been working one way for a while and suddenly it's not working. You have to be able to adapt. But the number one thing is also, if you unschool, right? Unschooling is a method of education where you it's very, very little structured, and it's very much free time and free play and free to do anything really. But with unschooling, the research shows that children will pick up what they need to when they want to. Yes. So I have one mother in my home education group, actually. She has two older kids and now two very younger kids, and she's home educated all of them. And the older two, she completely unschooled. She never did anything structured with them. And they only learned how to read and write at the age of 12. And now they're in their 20s, they're doing apprenticeships, they're completely very well-rounded, fine individuals, intelligent individuals, right? And she asked them, like, did you mind that you didn't learn how to read or write at like 7 or 8? And they're just like, no, it was fine. It was never a pressure to them. She never taught them anything like that, but they picked it up when they were ready. Yes. To me, that's a little, again, the old Indian woman in me is like, oh my God, like they can't read and write at 7? This is catastrophe. But trust the process. Trust that you're just creating a facility, an environment for them where learning is fun. And also, I think, depending on how young they are, it's quite a good idea to tell children, you know what? Education is a privilege, and actually many children in the world don't have that privilege. I have many Iranian friends, and there's, the massive situation going on in Iran, and I think it's Afghanistan now, who have abolished, women, no girls can have an education now. Like, education is a privilege, and again, if we could refocus our attention on that. Education shouldn't be something that you're forced to do. It is something that you get to do. Let's take it back to the basics a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Thank you. It's interesting. It's really interesting when you actually talk about, unschooling and let the children take what they need. You see, because we have been programmed so much at this age, you should be doing this. At this age, you should be doing this, or something is wrong with you. So if you don't go to university at 18 and 19, there is a problem. It's like being programmed. And when some of these young people go to university, they don't even want to be there. And then we have such a high dropout rate because they don't want to be there and it's not working for them. And depending on the country they come from, they have a stigma. Sorry?
I was going to say, and it's also a waste of their time. Like, you're just forcing them to do things that they don't really want to do.
Yeah. It is so very, very true. Thank you for that. Another question is, well, I think we've answered that actually. How do you think that home educating home education will prepare your child to navigate the external world more than traditional education?
So my ideal lifestyle is to world school the boys, and that is what I am currently building up in my business. I have a coaching business. We didn't really mention that, but I'm a life coach, clinical hypnotherapist, and NLP practitioner. And I work online with my clients and sell programs for people to feel supported on their self-development journey. And a lot of those clients are parents or individuals who have had, like many of us or all of us, challenging relationships with our parents. But I'm building my business so I have some financial freedom to travel with my boys. You know, I think I often say that travel is the only thing that you can spend money on, but you get richer, you know. I was very fortunate enough to travel a lot when I was young. And in retrospect, I understand that that enabled me to be compassionate to other people, have a very high emotional intelligence, and learn from other cultures, other countries, other races, other religions, you know. And I think that's important. I want to world school my children so they can be more understanding that it's not just this small little bubble. Like, I love London, don't get me wrong, but London has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And I feel like it's gone down the toilet a little bit, but that's my personal opinion. But more than anything, London has always had a very high stressful vibration, right? And that's just a fact. It's a very high-paced city, and I don't really want to raise my children in that. For me, I feel happy by the beach. And I want my children to learn how to surf. And I want my children to live in t-shirts and shorts for the majority of the year, you know? So I personally believe that if you can travel with your children, and it doesn't always need to be expensive, there are ways to travel on a budget. But I believe that traveling really expands the mind and the education of your children. And just holding space for your children to be truly authentically themselves, that is a gift. You know, not what society feels that they should be, not what the school thinks they should be, not even what maybe their grandparents think they should be. Like, let's start seeing our children for who they are and not who society says that they should be. And just see our authentic children for who they are and with their strengths, you know. Especially, can I just say, those parents who have children on the spectrum. The spectrum doesn't make your children any less than. Your children are just on a spectrum. I think my little one is probably on the spectrum, but I just kind of ignore it. I'm like, it just doesn't matter to me. It doesn't make my life less or worse. And some parents will find it comforting to have a diagnosis for their child because they have answers then. For me and other parents, maybe you don't want that label because then you're stuck in a box and then you're expected to do this. And I just don't want to live like that. I don't want to put any labels on my children that are unnecessary because, again, words have power. And if you're constantly telling a child, even subconscious or unconsciously, sort of, well, that's not good enough, that's not good enough, you have to try harder, you have to try harder. What are we conditioning our children to believe? We should be conditioning our children, because conditioning is a big word, right? Like, we can condition them negatively, but we can also condition them positively. We need to be conditioning our children to feel grounded in their body and confident to be their authentic selves. And how do we do that? We have to lead by example. So, like I said, it's not, home education isn't just for the children. It's really about everybody who is a caregiver for these kids.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It is so fantastic what you've just said in terms of the label, because I do feel, with my background as psychologist, I do feel that when we actually give these children a label, as much as the parents say, oh yes, you know, he's got he's been labeled X and he's ADHD, etc. I think the more we give them those labels, the more they produce those labels and the more they become this thing. And I do feel that, there's sometimes when we have a label, we feel it's easier to live by because we feel that we could find a solution. Sometimes the solution is not always what it ought to be. Because I feel when some of these children are labeled, it then continues on with them. And the more you don't know a label, you realize, okay, well, my child is thinking differently. There's nothing wrong with your child. That child just thinks differently from other children. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's to celebrate the uniqueness of your child. That is what I find that is missing.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like a child yesterday, was it a few days ago? Oh, Miss, I am autistic. And you know, and he said, oh, I might be saying something silly sometimes. I said, pause. I say, you just think differently. There's nothing wrong with you. You just do see things differently, and you act differently from how your brother does. But that doesn't mean that you're less dumb. I say, you're not. And I say, I don't want to ever hear you telling me, or let me hear it, you saying that you're dumb, because you're not. And what that actually stand in my mind was that child was told that he is dumb. So therefore he began to also wear that label as well as wearing the autistic label. And it was quite sad because I feel I had to deprogram and say, oh, yes, okay, you think differently, but you're unique. And every one of us are unique. And we will see things differently from everyone else. So don't you ever start the sentence by saying, oh, I'm dumb, or I might say something that is silly. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
You see, and this
when people say things like that to me, again, so the NLP part of me, I always listening to people's language, right? And people will say like, oh, I'm so stupid. And then I'll be like, well, hang on a minute. Actually, you're not. You might have done something stupid, you know, like, let's not label ourselves in it, right? Just change it. So, oh, I'm not dumb. I might have done something a bit dumb. Like, it's just the action, you know, and even just changing your language a little bit is the real change of rapid transformational therapy, you know, like small little things like the words you are telling yourself, the words you are telling your children, the words you are telling your students. All of these words have meaning, have power. Even on an unconscious, subconscious level, it's all going in, you know, one person telling you you're dumb, but then imagine like 3-4 people saying it, and for 3, 4, 5 years, you know, it's heartbreaking. Yeah,
it then becomes your reality because you don't know anything else.
Yeah, so it's all about reprogramming, rephrasing, you know, and shifting the stigma that is, we need to indoctrinate our children into this way of, like you said, a capitalist lifestyle where they're going to be working for someone else, working a 9 to 5, paying their taxes, and, you know, not being creative or fulfilled in their life. You know, like when people say, what do you want your kids to be when they grow up? The only thing you should say is happy, because that's fundamentally it. I don't need my kid to, you know, have an amazing car or a big house or a yacht or any of that stuff, because money does not equal happiness. And I think for a lot of people that don't have it, they think that it does. But trust me, I know some very, very wealthy people, and I work with some very, very wealthy people, and they are really some of the saddest people, you know, because they've been parented unconsciously by parents who were rich as well, who showed love with money and materialistic things. There's been no attachment, no true connection. So these people still grow up feeling a lack of self-worth.
That is so very, very true. And that is something we need to instill in our children. You know, a well-grounded child who is just happy and kind. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And
all of those parents, sorry, very quickly, I just want to say, for all of those parents who are struggling with children on the spectrum, I would really, really look into grounding techniques, because it's not something I've learned so much about yet, but from the brief pockets of little podcasts that I've seen and information that I have understood, children on the spectrum are sort of living outside of their bodies. As soon as you can bring the children really back into their bodies and ground them, that's when you start to see amazing change.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. Another thing is, what are the challenges and triumphs you've been experiencing on your journey?
There have been so many wonderful moments I couldn't even count, but being able to travel with my children, like I said, especially at 1/3 of the price, because I think it's terrible that, travel is 3 times the price in the school holidays. Again, that is something really, really unfair. But the fact that I've been able to travel with my children, the fact that I've been firsthand been able to see when they're mastering something, the fact that I never need to wake up my children to get them to school. I don't need to do the school run. My children sleep and wake up naturally. That is what is good for growing brains, little things like that. The forest school and our home education community, and watching them thrive in coding or, playing the piano or, anything like that. The fact that I get to spend so much time with my children is the biggest gift of this journey. It really is. I wouldn't change it for the world. I think as a society, just to think that we have, we are conditioned to think we should get married and then we should have babies, and then we love the baby so much, and then we need to go back to work, and we put them in school after 3-4 years. It just doesn't really resonate with me. I had children because I genuinely want to be with them. I like my kids, I like hanging out with them. And sometimes I say, you're annoying me, but that's okay. We have an authentic relationship, but I think that is the highlight, that I get to watch firsthand and live life with my children regularly.
That's wonderful. That's so wonderful hearing that. Thank you. And let's say if someone is thinking about homeschooling and there's so many doubts, they don't know what to do, they don't think they're going to be good enough, they don't think that they know enough, etc. What 3 tips would you give them?
Number 1, definitely find your community. Get in the groups, go online, go to local areas, find who's home educating in your local area and meet people. Number 2, find your education philosophy, is what I call it. Find what you believe matches and aligns with your deepest values and core beliefs, and teach that to you. Facilitate a space for your children to learn and educate. So find your philosophy. And thirdly, just know that you do not need to do it all on your own. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. I don't teach my children. I have taught them things that I feel I can. So I practice yoga with them, and we do mindfulness, and I'll take them swimming, and obviously we travel, and I take them to the shops, and they just see sort of day-to-day life with me. But like I said before, I'm not very good at math. I've hired a tutor to do that. They have online platforms where they can learn. I am not responsible for teaching them the things that I am not good at, right? So you do not need to teach your children anything if you don't feel confident to do so. You can facilitate an environment, a space that is nurturing of their needs and their passions. And for anything else, there are groups, there are tutors, there are online platforms, and there are other ways for your children to be supported in whatever education matches your education philosophy.
That's brilliant.
Know your philosophy, and you don't need to do it yourself.
Yeah, I think the last one is so important, rather. You don't have to do it all by yourself, because I think that's the misconception where people who want to home educate they feel that they have to do it all by themselves and they have to match the national curriculum. No, you don't. You don't have to do it.
You have no legal obligation to follow the national curriculum. You actually have no legal obligation to follow any curriculum. You just have an obligation to provide your child with an education. But that's all relative, you know, like what one person thinks is a good education, another person would not. And none of the local authorities have any funding or say or any real strength behind them to tell you how to educate your child.
Wow, that's important to know. Very important to know, because I was just saying that to someone last week, that, you know, there's no legal obligation as long as you educate your child. You know, so it's really nice that someone who's actually doing it is now, you know, reinforcing that.
Because the only legal obligation you have as a parent of a child who is of the legal educational age, which I believe is 5.5, the only legal obligation you have is that if your child is registered at a school, you need to send a letter of deregistration. That's it. That's all you need to do. And the truth is as well, and you know this, Debbie, as well, because you work in a school, I think school is a business. And if you understand that school is a business, again, it's not a well-being hub for your children. It is a business, and they're just doing their best. They want their statistics. They want to get their, you know, Ofsted reports good. And again, it's no one's fault, and there are brilliant teachers and, you know, headmasters and people staffed in school that are really, they got into the job because they love children. But I think once you're in the job, you realize, oh, it's a business. Like,
it is. You know? It is. It's like, you know, it's like it's a business, and it's like you shopping around for the best deal. So it's like how you shop around with the supermarkets to get the best deal. You know, parental choice. So parents are shopping around to get the best deal for the children, i.e. the best school for the children. And that is based on a lot of cases, the Ofsted reports, you know, or in terms of the number of children that get the A stars, etc. It doesn't matter how much that school program the children, because parents is not looking at, oh, these children are being programmed to get the high grades. Parents is looking at, oh yes, this school have X amount of students that have got high grades. However, what they fail to realize is if they have 5 children in the class and then you have 3 of them pass at A star, the school say, and we've got 50% A star students in history. But did you know there were just 5 students?
Yeah, I always worry about how, you know, accurate statistics are. But look, if we worried about that, like, you'd have no life.
Exactly. Is there anything else you want to say to us before we say goodbye to our wonderful audience?
If you need me for anything, I'm here to support other parents. I just want to say that, I guess, you know, my business is called The Why Practice, and it is online. I help people with conscious parenting, so understanding their parenting skills and acknowledging their generational trauma. I help people also get organized in their life and get rid of fears and phobias. And then I support people who want to live a fulfilling life and truly, truly desire change. If there's any of your audience who thinks that they could benefit from my facilitating a space of change, please, you know, get in touch. And just to say thank you again so much, Debbie, for your community, you know, for you speaking out and educating people on what is a very, very important matter in our society. And like you said, you know, you're preaching now and you're spreading the word. And I think that's just more important. More of you, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I so thank you for actually accepting the offer to come online, because I do feel that we need to start, you know, dispelling the fear of not being good enough to teach your children. Because after all, you brought them here, you know them more than anyone else. Yeah. And it's wonderful to continue to educate them. And yes, the school system is brilliant, but it's also outdated, because when you look at it in the 18th century, the children still sit in rows, face the front. If you turn behind, there is a problem, you know. So all of this, I know I'm a teacher, but there's sometimes there are a lot of things in there that I don't agree with. I'm one of these teachers that is outside the box, and it gets me in trouble all the time because I do not always follow the rules, etc. Because some of the rules I think is a nonsense rule. That's not
It's
always
the
wrong.
best kind of way. We make our own rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you know.
Exactly. Thank you very much. And thank you guys for listening. I'll be on again tomorrow with a female educator from around the world telling us what it is like post-COVID, teaching in the classroom, and what have we taken back into the classroom from the online system. Well, I have taken back very little, because we are back in the classroom, business as usual. People have forgotten that we've had a pandemic, and these children have a lot of traumas, and they cannot navigate in terms of the emotional intelligence. They cannot even do this. They don't know how to navigate the emotion. And it's a big thing in school. People are not aware of that. And they feel that, oh, there's nothing wrong, children are okay. As I was saying today to one of my colleagues, the year 10 children, those were the COVID children. So they don't know how to behave because they have lost out on developmental process.
Yeah.
So, you know, those are things we need to start to train the children again in terms of developing on an emotional basis, because they've lost that. You know,
And I say, you know, stressed parents have stressed babies. And the
yes.
pandemic, you know, people were stressed, and that nobody is to blame for that. Well, that's not blame, but parents are not to blame and children are not to blame. You know, it's just what happened. You know, stress stays with you. And if you had a baby during lockdown or during the height of the pandemic, chances are that baby really did feel your stress, you know? So there's some connection to be made up.
It is very true. That's why I also say to some teachers, we cannot tell these children off. It's not entirely their fault. We need to pause and say to ourselves, okay, these children have missed out on the developmental stages, so they don't know how to behave. That, you know, it's like I would have some year, you know, had a year 12. She is swinging on the table, and I'm looking at her, what are you doing? You know, it's like those are the behavior you see in the primary school. But at the same time, I had to look at one and say, okay. And it's like you have the excessive giggling. There's so many different behavior that you're now experiencing that you did not experience before COVID. But all this is the lack of development. And we cannot blame.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how these children, you know, develop in the educational system, you know. It'll be really interesting to see just, you know, society in general for the what happened, the repercussions of the pandemic, how they will wave on in society.
That's interesting. Yeah, that is very true, how they're not. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for listening. And, you know, I've got the YouTube channel. Just have a look, Teacher Success Coach. And all of these are there where people are sharing their journey of home education, homeschooling. And I interview with not only women, I interview home educators of homeschool across the world, because in every country it's done very differently. You know, and we could all learn from various individuals from different countries. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to spell. So we could see how other countries work, and we could take some from here, take some from here, and then make our own up. Right? Thank you guys very much. Thanks. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Stay blessed. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Right.
Are we still here then?
All
good?
I'm just trying to, oh yes, there we are.